Today back with Valdas on radical feminism. We're getting started, if not near pretty close to it. Yeah. So,
okay. Good afternoon and welcome back to our series on neo-Marxism and feminism, and we'll continue where we left last Friday. Betachbulot ta'aseh lecha milchama. Well, I don't know how my Hebrew sounds, but this was Mossad's original motto, and translated into English means, by way of deception thou shalt do war. This is actually a phrase from the Bible, Proverbs 24:6. And no, I don't want in any way to imply that conspiracy or something, that modern feminist movement is creation of Mossad, but I just like this phrase because feminism also masquerades as a movement ostensibly for women's rights, but it is a deception. This kind of deception is typical of subversive movements of communist origin. And today, because it turned out that we'll continue this next Friday also, so I moved all nasty stuff, all statistics that show not the roots but fruits of feminism to next Friday, and today we'll devote this session to what in American journalism is called human interest stories. So I will tell two stories about two real persons behind feminist movement, and one would be after, questions after. Radical feminism, new feminism, second wave feminism, Marxist feminism, any feminism. So the first one will be from the old left, Betty Friedan, and another from new left, Andrea Dworkin. And it can be said that the course of American history was changed in 1963 with the publication of Betty Friedan's book, The Feminine Mystique. And I showed you this book last Friday, and I said that I started reading it, and while I can't say that I succeeded in much, now I'm on page 62, and it's torture to read, but I will succeed reading this book because I don't want just to look like that young fellow a few weeks ago who said that in order to criticize Mein Kampf, he does not necessarily has to read it. Well, if I talk about the book, so at least what I can do, I can read that book before talking. So over 5 million copies of this explosive book eventually would be sold, and it is widely credited with, or blamed for, depending on whom you talk to, launching the modern feminist movement in America. Well, it definitely made Friedan herself a celebrity, that's for sure. Her book eventually was translated into a dozen languages and is currently regarded reading in hundreds of college courses worldwide. The Feminine Mystique is widely regarded as one of the most influential non-fiction books of the 20th century. The ultimate Zeitgeist book, the Bible of modern feminism. In 1976, a New York literary club included it along with works by Galileo, Marx, and Mao Zedong in its exhibit called books as troublemakers, about books that stirred millions of people and changed their lives. In her obituary following the death of Betty Friedan, Associated Press writer Hillel Italy summarized Friedan's book in these terms, I quote, "Few books have so profoundly changed so many lives as did Friedan's 1963 bestseller." Anna Quindlen, a journalist and novelist, in her introduction to the most recent paperback edition, this one, proclaims that this book changed her life and that of millions upon millions of other women. Anthropologist Ashley Montague said that Friedan's book was, and I quote him, "the wisest, sanest, soundest, most understanding and compassionate treatment of American women's greatest problem." End of quote. This is why Betty Friedan herself is universally regarded as a founding mother of modern feminism, the architect of the contemporary feminist movement in America. Well, in October 1966, Friedan indeed played a leading role in founding the National Organization for Women and other groups promoting what in FemSpeak is called women's liberation. The controlled media, of course, hyped Friedan to the heavens. She was celebrated as sort of new oracle. In 1975, Friedan was named Humanist of the Year by the American Humanist Association. She even was elected to the National Board of the Girl Scouts. Thereafter, she received numerous honorary doctorates at Harvard, Yale, Columbia, and other universities. More than 4 decades later, Friedan, already dead, remains a larger-than-life figure to both friends and foe, a feminist matriarch, or a false prophetess, who led American women out of their happy homes. Central to the appeal of the feminine mystique was the idea that the author was writing from her own experience. American women purchased the book in droves because the author presented herself as just an average housewife, pretended to be a typical 1950s American mother and wife who had a revelation that women like her were exploited and oppressed. Friedan argued that millions of American housewives found the destiny of mother and housewife which society mapped out for them stifling, repressive, heavy, and even dehumanizing. The argument of mystique was that women were utterly ensnared by husbands and families and housework, which stultified, degraded, and yes, even dehumanized them. The feminine mystique has succeeded in burying millions of American women alive, she says in her book. Author wanted to make the impression that her book emerged principally from, I emphasize, her own suburban captivity. In the book, Friedan claimed she had lived in, how she calls it, a comfortable concentration camp of New York City's suburbia. By her own account, she was a fellow sufferer of the middle-class woman in the United States to whom the book was directed. Well, in his 1998 book, Betty Friedan and the Making of the Feminine Mystique, Smith College professor Daniel Horowitz, this book, he has dramatically refuted that claim. Professor Horowitz demonstrates in his book that the self-image Friedan painted was far, far different from her real-life history. He reveals a dark side to Friedan's social activism. Betty Friedan was a long-time participant, actually, in the American Communist movement. So, it turned out, Mommy was a commie. Daniel Horowitz establishes beyond doubt that the woman who has always presented herself as a typical suburban housewife until she began work on her groundbreaking book was in fact nothing of the kind. In fact, Under her maiden name, Betty Naomi Goldstein, she was a political activist and professional propagandist for the communist left for a quarter of a century before the publication of the feminist Mystique, launched the modern women's movement. Here are some of the highlights of Friedan's hidden radical political past that Daniel Horowitz has brought to light in this book. As far back as her student days at Smith College, the future feminist leader lived in a world inhabited by those on the communist left. Young Betty Goldstein was first exposed to communist thinking while an undergraduate at Smith College in the late 1930s and early 1940s. While at Smith College, her leftist views were developed by the radical outlook of some of her professors and fellow students on the Northampton, Massachusetts campus of Smith College, those who pushed her in the direction of a full acceptance of the Soviet line. While Friedan was at Smith, people committed to liberal and left-wing positions dominated campus-wide public discussions, notes Professor Horowitz. He credits such an atmosphere with forming the ideology of Friedan, who later served the cause of international Marxism in various capacities. For example, in her junior year, she took an economics course with Dorothy Wolfe Douglas, a course on social movements and socialism taught by a woman who would serve as a role model for Betty. A wealthy and compelling person, Professor Douglas was a radical with capital R. In February of 1941, on Betty's 20th birthday, in a lecture on women in Nazi Germany, she recorded what Douglas had to say about the condition of women under German National Socialism. Professor Douglas mentioned what she called the feminist movement. In contrast, she talked about the traditionalism of the National Socialist attitude to women, children, and family. Nazis insisted, she noted Douglas as saying, on placing children at the center of family lives. Wow, that's concentration camp, wasn't it? During the summer of her junior year, 1941, guided by Professor Douglas, Betty even